Hey everyone. I hope you had a great Christmas. I want to put out a video to discuss some things that, or I know I'm going to bring up on Street's show this Wednesday. And I just want to say out front that this really doesn't have anything to do with a solution, although I'm going to refer to various solutions during this video. This more has to do with geography and geology, and probably some anthropology and archaeology on top of all of that too. So some of it's going to be pretty deep information, but I wanted to point out a couple of things. And along the way, I'm going to show you one pretty major thing that I wasn't aware of. And I'm sure a lot of you are not aware of it either. When I was doing some studying on plate tectonics and stuff in regards to stuff that Trusted Living and Street and Candy have been talking about on their shows. I did a lot of research on the tectonic plates, and incidentally, the tectonic plates and what they call continental drift really didn't come in until the early 1900s, and then by the 1960s, pretty much everybody in the scientific community agrees with it. So a lot of what I'm going to show you right now is based on that, and a lot of you are probably going to be aware of a lot of this. But right here, we're looking at a single continent called Pangea, and this would be roughly a picture of it 250 million years ago. This is what they believe that how all of the continents are formed. Basically, it started with one huge landmass, and then it slowly broke off and pieces spun around. And I'm going to kind of show you the evolution of that. And these are where all of the most of the places, they don't have everything here, like Russia would be out over here and stuff like that. But they're showing where most of the stuff would have been if it existed on Pangea. So the United States would be here, Canada, Greenland, Scandinavia, Great Britain, Africa, India, right? And the reason why I thought of this is a lot of the stuff that Street and Trust to talk about, we're always assuming based on science that how did, the technology that they discovered in Egypt or whatever end up all the way over, in South America? How did they get the same alignment, the same, because they couldn't travel across vast amounts of ocean back then. One of the potential answers is that maybe human life as we know it didn't happen recently. Maybe it did exist 200 million years ago. Okay, which would mean that they easily can get around, okay, with the technology that would later be discovered after all of the continents were formed. All right. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here. So this is Pangea. In Pangea, these bars here, the gray and the white bars, represent mountains that we can date back. Okay. And you'll notice that this goes through the eastern United States here. Basically, they believe not believe, they've proven scientifically, and I didn't know this, but the Appalachians, which is what this would represent, are 500 million years old. Okay. They're far, far, far older than the Rockies, which are only like 75 million years old. Because the Rockies were formed partially due to the continents and plate tectonics. Okay. So when things broke apart here and moved, pieces of these mountains, as you'll begin to see, formed mountain ranges that were in the United States and in other countries. Those mountain ranges in geography, they ended up breaking them up right here, and they usually broke them up where a mountain is. So everything down here was part of what they call, and I hope I don't butcher these names, Gondwana, and the United States and everything up here was part of Laurasia. And obviously, it became broken up more and more. I'm not trying to teach the evolution of the continents and geography here. I'm just giving a really brief, high level view of it. And I'm probably going to make a lot of mistakes. I'm certainly no expert, but all the information I'm telling you, I tried to verify it as best as I could. And along the way, you'll run into a lot of problems because geologists don't necessarily agree with each other about certain things. I'm not going to get into that stuff because this isn't about trying to prove a theory or anything like that. I'm just going to give you a top overview, and you'll see how all this comes together at the end. So here's your mountain ranges here. There's more than this, but these are known mountain ranges before it broke up that were on Pangea. Like I said, I showed you this one initially, but there's more mountain ranges. And when these broke apart, okay, um, things, continents rotated and they moved around based on the currents and the winds. Okay, these arrows here are showing the ocean currents, and we know that these are true. This is the equator here, and we know that, for example, water moves clockwise through here. So the water would be basically warm up in here, and then it would come back up in this way, and it would start going down, and that would influence how this would break apart essentially, right? So the same thing here, you would have colder waters obviously up here and colder waters down here, and they would warm as they approach this area. So I'm pretty sure that you guys understand that too, but I just wanted to show how it began. So this map here is kind of colored sort of like you'd be looking at it in Google Earth. If we rolled back time and went back to Pangea, and we used all the information we know about the water and moisture levels based on the currents and the winds and the jet stream and stuff on how things would have formed. So you can see this is like a grassy area. This is like forest all around here. And you can see how that represents, what we currently have in the United States and through South America. And of course, these areas are either going to be desert, or of course, this is, Siberia. The stuff that's going to be really cold and over up around here. But these are kind of arid. Okay, it gets arid, and then we're going into like a desert like area, right? So this is what it would have looked like. This is prior to they broke up. I'm not obviously not going to show you what it looks like today, because you could fire up Google Earth or just get a map of the Earth and you'll see where all of the continents are and how the islands were formed and all of that. Like I said, I'm not showing geography. But I just wanted to put this out there for street, because when we're discussing things that happened in an arid or in a desert type area, and actually technically back in the day, um, you know, Egypt, for example, was not a desert. It was, they probably had palm trees and stuff. So when these things would move and rotate and shift around into their current position, they're shifting around, and some of them will pass over the equator and move south of it and so on. And obviously that's going to impact their temperature for current day. But if it didn't break apart and it still was Pangea today, this is primarily what it would look like. Now I wanted to show you like kind of what happens when the land would, the tectonic plates in the ocean would crash into a continental land. What would happen? Okay. So let's say that this is the Pacific plate. What happens is the continental plate, I guess, has more. It's heavier, right? It's thicker than it is at the oceans, because obviously the oceans are going to have a thinner crust, right? They're down lower, they're closer to the Earth's core and the molten lavas, right? So what would happen is it would go under the continental plate. And what happens over here is this debris and this debris at the ocean floor would, over millions of years, start forming layers of sediment deposit, and it would end up forming mountains over here. Okay. Right here, we got pressure from the heated lava, and the upward pressure from the plate below it is going to push mountains up here. But those mountains would be bent, like kind of like you see here. In other words, the depth is, from all angles, is approximately the same if this was a curved mountain. In other words, you're going to go through the various layers of sediment down into granite, which is as you get closer to the heat, and through different elements, okay, that are in the ground, depending on how far down. Are you 20 miles down, 30 miles down, 15 miles down in the ground? All right. So that's how things normally occur. when a continent would shift and come closer, because the tectonic plates under the ocean and the continents are all drifting above the molten core, and they hit each other. This is what happens. This is kind of another image that's showing the same example, and you'll notice that how this has a downward and an upward pressure on the continent, and you can see it bulging up here where it would form a mountain, and you can see what I'm talking about, how the depth is kind of uniform around there. It's creating like a hump. Above the ground, this is kind of what it would look like. You would have the coast would be on this side, and it's going to push up mountains. That's normally how things happen. You'll see these mountains are pushed up. Okay, so it's coming up from below the ground, and eventually, from the weather, the wind, it erodes, and then the rock slides, and the dust, and so on and so forth would go down and fill in the valleys and everything below. That's essentially what it would look like under normal circumstances. But if you look at a map, you'll notice that the Pacific plate, there's actually more than one. And when it comes to the United States, the western edge of North America, I mean, you'll notice that the Rockies are kind of odd because in some cases they're 1,000 miles inland, way away from the plates. So how were they formed? Okay, and geologists are always constantly debating this, and they basically, like I said, there's some arguments about this, but I'm not going to get into the details of it. I'm just going to give you a top level generic view of what happened. And the other thing you got to remember when I show you this is that there used to be an ocean that would come from just below Western Canada, and it would shoot down through Montana and all the way down through Wyoming and Colorado and New Mexico. All that was completely underwater. It was under an ocean. We know that for a fact because the at the bottom of the ocean, there's crustaceans and other sea life fossils that are now up at 8,000 feet and stuff, 10,000 feet in the middle of Colorado and Wyoming. So we know for sure that, and we can also prove the continental drift because you'll see palm tree fossils up in Wyoming, for example, and obviously that's not anywhere near where there would be palm trees. But because of how things rotated and smashed against each other, is what happened. So at one point, obviously, that ocean was no longer there anymore, and it would fill in partially due to this action of continental drift and the tectonic plates. And here's what they believe happened to generate the Rockies. But I want to explain something about it after I show you. Before I do it, though, just wanted to show you one other screenshot that kind of shows you what would happen. This blue here would be an ocean, a trench would form. You can actually see these trenches on Google Earth. And then a plate would go down below the continental plate and it would push up the mountains like this. Okay. And then new crusts would be formed as things start to ripple and it fills in with sediment. Because remember, this is happening over millions of years. So you've got the ocean waves coming in, bringing in sea life, and then eventually that sea life would get trapped in these areas between these rocks and that would exist between the different layers of the ground. That's a normal circumstance. Of course, when you have volcanoes and fault lines and stuff under the ground, things change. And I'll get to that again in a minute. So this image is a little bit blurry, so excuse me for it. I had to capture it from a video, but this is that plate that went under the ground. Okay, this is what they're assuming happened. Normally, those plates, like I showed you in those previous images, dive down, and then of course they get mixed in with the lava and they disintegrate, right? But what they believe happened with the Rockies is it went down, okay, and then it curved back up, just like you see here, and then it put pressure. Depending on how far in you are, it could be up to 1,000 miles, like I said, and that caused mountains to appear here. Now, remember, if these were the Rockies, this was at one time ocean over here. Okay, so the crust would be thinner down here. So it wouldn't look exactly like this. It would be this black area or brown area would have been thinner in the ocean than it was here. So this continues to push up. Okay, And then, of course, the lava is going to go over above it and superheat, heat everything that's up from this point, which is how gold and other minerals and stuff are generated when that happens, and crystals form and so on and so forth. Granite is formed from the molten lava, and then it pushes and pushes and pushes it up. But as you can see, this is a normal mountain here. Now, keep that in mind because I'm going to show you right now what I didn't know until very recently. This is a shot in Colorado of the amphitheater, okay? And these are called, I believe, flat irons. I don't know, remember the exact term, but you could see the layers here. So each one of these, between these layers, is sediment. So we know what like water had traveled over this at one point. There'll be fossils and stuff like that in these various layers. Okay. So this will be like sandstone, shale, stuff like that. And you can see pebbles and stuff like that in the in between the layers where the fossils would be. All right. Now this is unique. This is actually on the east side of it's close to Denver, I believe, or Boulder. I don't remember. This is the part that I didn't know. I'm gonna kind of tell you in a couple seconds, but I want to show you this first. Okay, so you'll see that this is odd. Normally mountains are curved, right? You don't see anything like this. This is most of the time, I believe they said they were like 20 or 30 degrees, usually tilted, but this thing is at 60 degrees. That's major tilt. There had to be some major pressure going on. But you could see, like over here, this is a mountain, doesn't look anything like this, right? That would happen on this edge. And that is what they believe happened by what was going on under the ground when it curved back up. It pushed this up. And by this, I mean, everything from like this point north, okay, including the bighorns and down by Laramie and stuff like that. It tilted everything up. Up in the bighorns, it actually tilted it almost 90 degrees. And I've discussed this before. So those mountains, this is what I'm getting at. There's two sets of Rockies, right? And this set that I'm showing here, and that's basically in the, what is it, Santa de Cristo, something like that. That's in northern New Mexico and in Colorado. And then we got the other mountains extending north for on southern Wyoming, and then it goes straight up to the Bighorns. The Bighorns are actually a different part of the Rockies, just like Colorado and just like New Mexico, than the Rockies that are in, let's say, Yellowstone Park in western Montana. Those are different. And I wasn't aware of that, right? I'll show you a couple more screenshots first. If you were to look beneath the layers that I just showed you that are up 60 degrees, you can see that you'll come to a section where there's no more layers. This is actually granite down here, okay? And what happens when erosion happens, it erodes off all of the sediment, goes down into the basins, okay? And it fills them in, and eventually rivers will get carved out because this up here is easy to erode with water. When it hits the granite doesn't necessarily erode like that due to the weather. So that's why you have a lot of jagged peaks and everything in the Rockies, because the Rockies at one point used to be 29,000 feet tall. They're half the size they used to be. So what happened was it pushes up like a bubble, and all of the sedimental layers are eroded off, revealing the Rockies, revealing the granite and stuff like that, right? But everything on the southern Rockies, which extends, like I said, from New Mexico all through Colorado, is the southern Rockies, and all the way in Wyoming up to and including the Bighorns. Okay. Everything west of that is considered the northern Rockies. The northern Rockies are created, just like I said, they're like a hump, and then all the sediment is washed off, eroded off, revealing the granite. But the Bighorn Mountains, as I said, are almost standing 60, 70, 80 degrees on their side, tilted up. So the granite was already exposed. So those mountains are unique in that as you walking up the mountain, you're essentially going back 2 billion years. Okay. This granite down way down lower than this was formed like almost 1 billion years ago. Not, So it's extremely old, and the Bighorn Mountains and the mountains in Colorado are unique that way, and that there's it's odd in the way they were formed, the way everything was tilted and pushed up with such tremendous force, where it's laying almost on its side, and a lot of that was due to the volcanic action that happened. Basically, they believe from like New Mexico all the way up to where we currently have the volcano, the giant cauldron that's in Yellowstone. That's actually extends all the way down to like Riverton and stuff. It's huge under the ground. It's like it's not just in Yellowstone. The cauldron's huge. That's just the opening of it. Let's say the lake. If you want to look at the cauldron under the ground, it's almost like one quarter the size of Wyoming and part of Montana. The friggin' thing is huge, and of course they're estimating because they don't know how big it is. For all we know, it could extend farther south. It probably goes all the way down past the Wind River Range, in my opinion. It's huge, and when they have earthquakes and stuff like that, they have them all the way down there. So there's a lot of volcanic action. In fact, they believe there's a rift forming, and it's right now in New Mexico, and it's heading north. And they believe that the Rockies are going to fold in on themselves because of the volcanic action that's right beneath the granite is essentially going to blow, and then everything is going to cave in and basically be swallowed down into towards the molten lava that's going around the Earth's core. It's not going to happen in our lifetime, but it's going to happen. So if, of course, if that caved in like that, it's going to fill in with water again. So we would kind of be going back in time where all of a sudden there will be an ocean there. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. This is the Bighorn Mountain, and here's the Bighorn River down here at this level, and you can see everything is color coded according to age. This red area down here is 600 million to 3 billion years old. So when you're up at that wheel, for example, the Medicine Mountain, or you're up on Cloud Peak, you're standing on rock that is up to 3 billion years older than the stuff that's down in the basin. It's very interesting. Like I said, you can see the years of through the layers. And the only reason why they know this is because they could measure the minerals and stuff that are in here. Because certain minerals only form, let's say, 20, 30 miles below the Earth's crust. So they know where this came from. And they could see the mineral makeup that's in it. They could determine what layer it was in or what age. So up here, this stuff here they're talking about is, was formed 20 to a million years ago at the top. And then as we get down towards that orange, we're going to 1 to 63 million years ago, and so on and so forth. And you can see how many millions of years. But when we get to this red area, we're talking about a billion years. Now, this is not only the bighorns that are like this. This goes all the way through Colorado. And this is only what they call the Southern Rockies. Okay. I thought the Rockies were the Rockies. I didn't realize that they're structurally very different. When you're in Yellowstone looking at those mountains, those Rockies in there, like the Owl Creek Mountains, the Absaroka Mountains, the Wind River Mountains, everything west of the Bighorns, essentially, or Pryor Mountain in Montana, everything west of that is considered the Northern Rockies. Anything from the Bighorns south and then east is considered the Southern Rockies. So we could kind of see that on Forrest Fenn's map. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Here's New Mexico. Here's Santa Fe. If I draw a blue line, obviously this is outside the search area because he doesn't have he hasn't, it's not opaque. Only the opaque areas are the ones where the chest could be. So, like, if you were searching east of the Bighorn Mountains, you're outside the search area. But he could show this is in the search area, this is in the search area. But essentially what I'm saying is when Forrest Fenn said that the treasure chest is somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe, he was actually could have, and this is my speculation, but this is based on the scientific data. And remember, Forrest Fenn said if you knew a little bit about geography, it might be helpful. Well, this is geography. Geology is when you're actually studying the rocks themselves and how they're formed and the minerals and stuff. But geography, or is about the area itself. So there's two sets of Rockies. Anything within this blue box is called the Southern Rockies. Anything in this yellow box is the Northern Rockies. And the reason why they're different, another reason why, remember I just told you the uplift of the bighorns, and down here where they found all the dinosaur bones and stuff like that in Wyoming, and then everything through Colorado and down to here was formed based on different plates. Okay. You could look at the Pacific coast here and you can see that there's different types of action where these plates are pushing up northeast, okay, to form all these mountains. Unfortunately, it doesn't always show here. So there's kind of like a split, okay, of a diagonal split going down to California from like here up, where the bighorns would be somewhere like over here if this map extended, right? So these were essentially formed at a different time, okay, and due to different plate action than this set that's closer to the coast, which was formed by this plate up here. So it's interesting. I never knew that until I watched a couple of videos and I researched it online, and I'm like, wait a minute. There's two, right? Southern. Actually, I believe there's also a central, but just when they're talking about the geological structure and the geography of it, this is all considered different, structurally different than all of the Rockies over here. And so these mountains over here expose older fossils, older ground than is exposed over here, because these layers are all eroded differently than was eroded here. Because if it was forced up to tilt, right, like I showed you, the granite is near the top. The granite's not going to erode, so the erosion would be different because it would erode the sides before it erodes the top, unlike these. So that's a major structural difference. I don't know how many of you guys are aware of that, but that's pretty cool. So now I want to talk briefly again, and we've seen this before, about migration patterns and how it happened. So initially, if you look at this, because of the glaciers, the ocean levels were much, much, much lower than they are today. Like, look how wide Florida is. So essentially, you could walk here around in these kind of white areas because that was actually land. It wasn't water. So people could walk. All right. And that's going to become important in a minute. This is the Bering Strait. The Bering Sea is up here. Because of the ice, people were able to come from Siberia and migrate over to current day Alaska. All right. That would literally be land. So they initially thought that roughly 12,000 years ago, what happened is this area opened up in the ice, and Paleo Indians would come down here. Okay, 12,000 years ago, they would come down this way. This was all still ice over there and ice over here. Now, when they would come across here 12,000 years ago, they would come down, they would follow the mammoths and, the grizzly bears and all the animals that came over from Siberia over to here. And that's how they would get their food and so on. And they would slowly and slowly work their way down. We've discovered fossils, we've discovered various DNA from mummies and stuff like that along the way to kind of prove this point. So that's 12,000 years ago. And then basically they would come down and they would go down through current day New Mexico and Colorado and all that, and down through Mexico and then up around here. So that's how the Mayans would have formed up around here, for example. They came down this way. And then some of them, of course, kept going down into Brazil and South America. Well, they recently realized that not only did they come here 12,000 years ago, we believe that they came here 15,000 years ago. A different group of people, they've traced different DNA along the coast. So they're assuming that instead of coming this way, when the ice was over here before it melted, the coast was wider here. So they actually came down along the coast 15,000 years ago. And that could have been when the Mayans would have came in and populated this area, 15, 16,000 years ago, and then down to South America. How do we know this? Well, down in South America, I believe, um, I forgot what country. I don't know if it was Brazil. But anyway, they found remains down there that dated back 15,000 years ago. So obviously, that means that this theory of 12,000 years wasn't accurate. Before that happened, people were coming down this way, and this was all ice, so they didn't go over here yet. So it is true that it was 12,000 years ago. As this started to open up, between 12 and 11,000 years is when the Paleo Indians come around. And they used to believe the Paleos were the first people here. They used to call them Paleo First, was a moniker I think they used. But then they found out that that's not true. There were other people that came over from essentially Asia or Eurasia and came down through Siberia, and they believe they came along the coast 15,000 years ago. They started, and that's when they were down here. Okay, so that would explain why we have some odd things they discovered with fossils and with the Mayans and stuff being down here 15,000 years ago, which is obviously earlier than the 12,000 that they predicted. But they forgot to consider the fact that when this was filled in with ice, these coastlines actually got wider. The continent was wider. And the same was true here. Okay. So they were able to come around, and that's how they got down there. One of the, and we're going to discuss this on Streets channel because we're just talking about history and we're going to talk about the Mayans, and about what we believe is going forward. One of the things that I was pointing out to Street when I was talking to him on the phone was that my wheel is actually tied to the same things that him and Candy are talking about. And the reason why I'm saying that is, like I pointed out with J. Ellis Ransom discovered that the wheel in the Bighorn Mountains is 12,000 years old. And he believes it's related to, it's an Aztec or a Mayan calendar, basically. The Aztec calendar is a newer version of the Mayan calendar. So when people are talking about the Mayan calendar, it would be older. But the Aztec calendar is based on the Mayan calendar, and they're very similar, the same number of days a year and all of that stuff. So, he even says in his book that he believes they came down and they're the ones that built the wheel. And the wheel used to be a structure where they would have wood and everything on it. In other words, it matches the kiva in San Lazaro, and that the spokes there would be a roof on there, and then a center pole and rafters going around it. Well, the wheel is the same thing. They had the 28 spokes. You imagine that as a building, and it would be a sweat lodge. Okay, there's a center pole in the middle, and they would use it to do their ceremonies. That's what he believed it was originally used for, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that now. But that kind of relates to, if Forrest Fenn was doing the San Lazaro stuff, and like Candy is talking about, Skippy died over here in Cozumel, and the Mayans were basically generally down in this area, and the Aztecs, I believe, were up around here. Um, that then it would kind of make sense that if he's going to be down here, he was also, I believe, and Street was telling me that Forrest Fenn was also down in the Amazon. So he was definitely interested in stuff. Now, why wouldn't he also have been interested in what J. Ellis Ransom was saying? In fact, that may have been some of his studies with Ken Tankersley and George Friesen, who loved the Bighorns because of the fact that they found Clovis there, and they found Clovis down here, which I believe the Fencash came from somewhere around here. That's because they migrated down in this way. So Forrest Fenn obviously would discover their migration patterns. So it would make sense. Let's say, for example, that, and I always tell Street, when I'm talking about a sob, there's two sobs. The sob that I'm primarily talking about now is the door prize, let's say, right? So the treasure chest. Okay. Now let's say he left something in that treasure chest that leads you down to San Lazaro. So in other words, and also Street Sob and Candy, they're talking about stars, they're talking about Orion's belt, they're talking about spirituality, and they're talking about the Mayans. Well, the Mayans came from the same group of people, the Paleo Indians that came down through here, right? So it's all related. So it would kind of make sense. I mean, because you talk about a canopy of stars. Well, yeah, the Kiva, canopy of stars, the Mayans, all around astrology, right? Well, the wheel is the same thing because it was the same people that came down here. Now, it's interesting because J. Ellis Ransom was an amateur. He had a PhD in anthropology, but he was an amateur archaeologist. So they kind of treated him like they treated Forrest. And when you go to the wheel, everything talks about Dr. Eadie, okay, in 1974. They don't really pay much attention to what J. Ellis Ransom found in 1924 or his studies. They shun everything he talks about. But I think Forrest was absolutely 100% aware of it. And you got to remember that Joe Crow had a degree. He was the first. He was the first Indian to get a college degree. Not only did he get like a bachelor's degree, he got a master's degree, right? And then eventually a PhD in anthropology. Okay, so that guy was a war hero. He died at 102 as the last living Crow war chief. Okay, now you can't. Now we got pictures of Forrest Fenn with Al Simpson, okay, and Joe Medicine Crow. So if Forrest Fenn wanted to study anthropology, you're going to tell me, oh, and also Joe was one of the founding board members at the Cody Museum. So are you honestly going to say that Forrest Fenn would never talk to him? Of course they did. Of course they did. Matter of fact, I bet you Preston talked to J. Ellis Ransom. They all did. Okay. I mean, if you're studying anthropology about the life of the people and how they migrated, and you're into archaeology, obviously, if you're looking for artifacts, you're going to talk to key players: George Friesen, okay, Joe Medicine Crow, the Ken Tankersley, and yes, J. Ellis Ransom would be one of the other amateurs. And it's interesting because all of J. Ellis Ransom's papers are all in Cody, and so are Forrest with Joseph Henry Sharp. So all these guys work together. I know it. Okay. They were all medicine men. Okay. Francis Brown, medicine man. Charles Brady, medicine man. Hammond Wise, medicine man, or an elder, right? Joe Medicine Crow, medicine man. Not only was Joe Medicine Crow, he was his direct ancestor. One of them, I believe, was Crazy Horse. So he has direct ancestral connections to people that were with Sitting Bull. And what did Forrest Fenn have? Sitting Bull's peace pipe. Now, again, are we going to say that he never ever mentioned for Sitting Bull to Joe? Of course he did. Of course he did. That would come up as a conversation every time he was there. That's why he went to Mummy Joe's cave, and that's why he did all that studying with George Friesen. So, how do we know that, like I said, that Forrest Fenn didn't make that part of the chase? That'll give you clues that help out at San Lazaro. And then the same way they're pointing at Cozumel and the Mayans, because this is all the same thing. This is not like 9 Mile Hole or Yellowstone or some cheesy sob. This is a direct correlation to things that were huge in Forrest Fenn's life, meaning the Clovis culture, Paleo Indians, Plains Indians, archaeology, anthropology, right? All of this stuff is related. I'm sure there had to be a reason why he kept going up and down the Wyoming, and it wasn't Yellowstone. Okay, Yellowstone is a childhood memory, but his real childhood memory is collecting his first arrowhead. That's what began it all, just like he tells you. Okay, and Golden was about building his massive collection, and archaeology was his true love, not trout fishing. I believe, and this is the kind of stuff we're going to discuss probably with Street, because I don't think that dude's going to show up on Street's show Wednesday. The guy's a clown; he's not going to show up. I don't think he has the guts to show up. So we're definitely going to be discussing stuff like this. So, like I was saying, that's how people migrated. They came from Asia. They came across the Bering Strait. They didn't swim or take boats. This was all land. You could walk on it because the ice that was here was dropping the ocean levels. And this is the way they initially believed they came through these red arrows. Okay. 12,000 years ago, these red arrows. So everything up here is going to be older as you come down. And the same thing along the blue line, which is what they discovered 15,000 years ago. They believed that people came from the blue line along the coast when they could probably take rowboats or whatever. It was very close to the coast. You hug the coast, most of this was all dry land because the ice at that point filled this whole area. So they believe 15,000 years ago is when man first settled. So that could definitely be, like I said, how the Mayan civilization started down here and the Aztec civilization. And like I said, they found stuff that's older, all the way down through here. So they know for fact that at least 15,000 years ago, they believe. Now, there's some debate. Some people think there was humans way before that. And I tend to agree with that. I tend to agree with Street on that. There may have been life on here, humans, 200 million years ago when it was Pangea. And that would explain how this technology that they discover in Egypt or they discover in Central America or they discover in Japan ends up being replicated across the earth. Well, of course, because they were easily able to share it. Because all of these continents were all one continent or they were broken. They slowly moved, right? So they can easily discover everything. Now, this is the book again. Like I said, I have this book. Um, I would read it to you if I could, but that would violate the copyright, so I'm not gonna. But I think this book is like $10 if you want to buy it on Amazon. It's not that thick of a book, but you read it. The Bighorn Medicine Wheel: The Birth and Death of Humanity, and its successor to the Aztec Calendar Stone by J. Ellis Ransom. He believes the Bighorn Wheel was actually made. Essentially, what he's saying is it predates the Aztec Calendar Stone. Okay, because he's saying it's up here. Now, he could be wrong because he was basing it on 12,000 years ago. So it'd be 15,000 years ago that they would come down. And when the Mayans came here, right? So then 3,000 years later, of course, those people would have known the same technology that they brought over here across Siberia, from Siberia over to Alaska in 12,000 years. If they knew about it 15,000, they would have known in 12,000. And I believe Forrest Fenn found all of this by tracing history. So the wheel was definitely a significant piece of his life, exactly like the Kiva, which is the most spiritual place that he dug up. Okay, and Cozumel. And I totally understand now where Street and Candy are coming from when they talk about Skippy, because it would make sense because Skippy died in 1979. So, like Street said, you know, he was part of that. Skippy and Forrest probably discussed these things with the Mayans and the history. They probably had a common interest, right? So Forrest Fenn would fit the bill. And imagine how Forrest felt when his brother goes down there and ends up dying in 90 feet of water wearing his weight belt. He probably felt terrible when that happened, right? But the other question, like Street would say, is, well, what did his brother discover? And that's what Street and Candy are always talking about. Because I went back to Street and I'm like, yeah, but he didn't buy San Lazaro until the early 80s, right? Or the mid 80s. And then Street's like, yeah, exactly. So what did his brother discover that would make him want to go and buy that? And furthermore, when he bought San Lazaro, why did he immediately go directly to the spot? The first thing he digs up is the most sacred place on the entire Pueblo. Right? He went right to the medicine man's hut. Okay. And again, that's like I said, that's all tied, I believe, to the wheel. So it may actually be funny. And obviously, I'm going to rib Street a little bit here. But how do you know it didn't start like that? They started in Cozumel in 1979, did their research, Doug Preston, and then they started tracing back in history, and then he buys the Kiva. He discovers the Kiva in the mid 80s. He sells well, I believe his name is still on there, but I guess he put somebody else on there. He sold part of it or whatever he did. but he still left himself access to it, right? He did that before he got cancer, right? And then, bam, he gets cancer. That's when he decided to hide the chest. So doesn't it make sense that the wheel is somehow not only involved in the door prize, in my opinion, but also plays a big role in everything that you guys are discussing about the stars, spirituality, the Aztec calendar, the Mayan calendar, history of stuff like that. All of this stuff is related. Okay. And Forrest Fenn knew every single person that I'm pointing out to you. He knew. I can't say it for fact, but I mean, come on. Jailus Ransom is the Cody. All the stuff is in Cody. Right? He's alive when Forrest Fenn's alive. He's older than there. Forrest Fenn knows that this guy wrote this book he visited the wheel in 1924, I believe. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it was 1924. This is when he talks about prehistoric trail followed by the author in 1924. Spiritual trail to the afterworld up Five Springs Canyon. Both trails originate at the mouth of the canyon. The mouth of the canyon's here. Okay. This dotted line is the solstice sunrise that I was talking about. That's the exact same one that I use in my solve. I didn't base it on this map. I based it on the O and the E cairns and reading the poem. And it shoots me right down into Rainbow Canyon, right over where the treasure chest is. This line here is the ancient trail, and you can still see remnants of it. That's how they used to go to the wheel. Okay, they don't go that way anymore. They take this. They used to take this road. Now, of course, they take the newer road, 14A, and they come up to the medicine wheel. So, and again, you got to remember that George Frizen's up here. That guy's there. Ken Tankersley working with him on Sitting Bull's pipe. We got Francis Brown, who's talking about Sitting Bull and this coalition to save this last historical site began in 1988, the same time he had cancer. I mean, all of that stuff, in my opinion, can't be a coincidence. So if we go through Forrest Fenn's timeline, we're going from 79 out of Cozumel, and then we're up in the 80s, we're up at the Kiva, up at San Lazaro, and then bam, all of a sudden we're north of Santa Fe, and I'm at the wheel. So I do believe Street and those guys, and there's more to this. Now, Sam Smith, like I said, Sam is saying the same thing that Street said, except Sam wasn't talking about San Lazaro. He told me, he goes, I believe, Troy, up here, right up near this canyon mouth, up here where the hidden campground is, I showed you guys, Forrest Fenn made a discovery up here. Okay. And what led him to this discovery is the stuff that he found, his brother found in 79, and what his brother found at San Lazaro. He didn't word it exactly like Street did, but that's what Sam believed. And it's even possible maybe Sam heard part of that from Street at some point in the past, because Sam's been around in the chase since 2011. He's not with us anymore. He passed away in May of 2022. So he also talked to Forrest about all of this stuff. And all of this stuff. This is what I'm saying. It's really odd that I'm talking to Candy and Street and Trusted Living and the stuff that I heard from Sam Smith and what I discovered to myself. All of the stuff can be directly related to what Street discovered. So between all of us, as a sum, I believe the answer lies, right? It's got to have something to do with everything here. The wheel, Skippy, and San Lazaro. It's got to, right? I don't know, what you guys think, but I want to show you one more thing with this map. Just remember, this is that dotted line. This is the sun, solstice sunrise, okay? So here we are in Google Earth. I just wanted to show you again. Here's that same map. I overlaid it here, and you can see here's the medicine wheel. Here's the ancient trail. Here's the dash line. Okay, and remember, you're saying that is the spiritual trail to the afterworld. So if Forrest Fenn's spirit, and he's taking it with him, right? He puts the chest down here, and then the spirit continues up and then jumps into the afterworld in the center of the car. Simple. I mean, when I came across this book and then I seen that dash line, I'm like, holy crap, matches what we were talking about. I wish Sam and I would have noticed this, before June 6th, but we didn't. Okay, we were looking at the wrong area. We didn't know about Five Springs. We knew about, like I said, in the SOV I showed you, but we went directly to the wheel and passed it. We were looking the other way. We never thought to put our back to it until I got that hint um, from that guy that was called me up, or not called me up, but he sent me the donation the day the chest was found. He said, "Look at the bench, blah blah blah." As soon as he said that, I knew, and I'm like, "Ah, damn it!" I'm like, and I went right back. I'm like, "Yeah, looking for Lewis and Clark." We looked at the sun, looked to the east, the sun was there. We went to the south, there's a mountain we couldn't cross, so we found the nearest moving stream or creek or whatever. We followed it down until the point where only the water could go through, and then we had to turn around and come back. Okay. And then we had to take a Forest Service road out of here. And then we had to come in from the bottom. We could see our destination from here, but we couldn't get there. Only the water could go through. And then he's telling you it took a couple of days. They ran out of food. He's describing a vision quest. Okay. We ate all of our food on the first day. We ate all of our candy bars and stuff. We ran out of food. We tried to look for animals to kill for days, and we couldn't find anything to kill. No, he's talking. When you go on a vision quest, you basically you don't drink or eat, right? So you're going to start hallucinating and everything after a couple of days, and then when the vision quest is over, boom, you go down. You talk to the medicine man. You tell him, oh, I met a bird or whatever, came and talked to me, a spirit, and I seen this. And the medicine man, I'll tell you what that means. What did your vision mean? Okay, he'll explain it to you. That's one of the reasons why they would go here anyway. But this guy, J.L.S. Ranson said that the natives were actually afraid of the wheel initially. They ended up adopting it as their place. This is the home of Brown and all of that. But initially, they were afraid of it. But according to him, the Aztecs, and based on his research through anthropology, remember, this guy had a PhD in anthropology, just like Joe Medicine Crow did. He was like, no, but based on these people's beliefs, they would have some similar to the wheel that they would believe the spirits would go when they're dead. And that would be right up here. They're following the solstice line, just like we did. And they jump right into the center current of the wheel, into the afterworld. And that's when you begin your second life. So that's why we believe the treasure chest was dropped along the way. So you can kind of see where that dashed line, where the old trail used to be when you overlay it on there. And you can still see that old trail when you look. Now, this guy knows that that trail exists because he walked it. He walked it in 1924. So he was there like 50 years before Dr. Eady even seen the place and heard about it. But because he's not a professional archaeologist, they disregard what he said. I find it interesting that they disregarded the anthropology part because the man knows anthropology. But it's just a shame, and it's going to be funny as hell when it turns out that this is true. And Forrest Fenn made a major discovery, and he was basically shunned by all of the so-called academics, the know-it-alls that sit behind a book all day. And when Forrest actually got his butt out there and did the work, that's the same thing this guy did. He got his butt out there and followed the prehistoric trail with the arrows on it. Okay. And then he worked out what everything is. And he said, no, no. I mean, Dr. Eady, of course, didn't do his analysis yet that it aligned with the stars and all of this. But this guy came to the conclusion that no, no, it doesn't have anything to do with Native Indians. And this guy, essentially, when he wrote this book that this picture is in, he wrote the book in 1999, I believe, or 1992. So he wrote it long after Dr. Eady was there. And that's why he wrote the book. He wrote it to contradict what Dr. Eady said. And Robinson, the other guy that talked about the decarn, he contradicted it. And if you go to the wheel, you're going to see Dr. Eady and Robinson's. You're not going to see this stuff that I'm showing you here because they just disregarded it. This guy's easy to find if you search Bighorn, Medicine Wheel, Anthropology, whatever. He comes up, and the Aztec calendar and the Mayan stuff. It's really easy to find him, but there is no reference to this guy at the wheel. This is something that I had found. But like I said, I showed you out of my solid work. It doesn't have anything to do with this map. This is something that I found after the fact. That's really cool. But now whether or not the chase ended here or it ended at the Kiva at San Lazaro, it's up for debate. Nobody can really prove it either way. But my most interesting thought, I don't really give a crap if it ends at the Kiva or here. Either way, there's no reward for second place. But the most interesting thing to me is the fact that we're discussing it with each other, even though we have different solves, and we're all coming to the same conclusion that this is related to Mayans and Clovis culture and so on and so forth. This has to do with time and spirituality. Well, just like the Kiva is a very spiritual place, and just like to the Mayans, Cozumel area or the Yucatan Peninsula was a very spiritual place. This is a very spiritual place too. It's the only place, the only wheel. There's tons of wheels in North America, but this is the only one that's special. And why is that? Think about that for a moment. Why, especially the crow? And by the way, when you look at like Joe Medicine Man Crow, and you talk about the Crow Reservation, no place for the meek. Look at this video here that I have that I linked it. I'm going to link it here. I put it in my community section, Life on Native American Reservations U.S. I didn't make this video, but it's an interview. These are two guys. They're on a crow res. Here's the Bighorn Canyon behind it, or a section of it, the northern section, I believe, the most northern section, and it's the Bighorn River behind them. Okay, they're both Crow Indian. Okay, this guy talks about Joe Medicine Crow, and he mentions that Joe Medicine Crow, he went there when somebody was sick, and Joe was dealing with it. Right? He said that he actually seen Joe Medicine Crow heat up rocks with no fire, just by prayer. Amazing, amazing stuff. Now remember, Forrest Fenn had cancer. Do you not believe that Forrest Fenn would ever go to somebody like a medicine man like Joe Crow, who is a hero and everything, and talk to him about his ailment, okay, and see if he can help cure his ailment? Forrest Fenn likes these natives so much and spirituality so much. Do you not believe that he would involve that somehow in him having cancer? Of course he would. And all of this makes sense. It makes sense what Street's saying, makes sense what Candy's saying, makes sense what my sob, makes sense stuff Trustin talked about. All of this stuff ties together. I'm telling you, it's not a mistake that we're all discovering the same thing in stars and the same ties. We're all back to the same people. It's just that we're all at different time periods. But when people migrated to North America, either 15,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago, they came across the Bering Strait. That's the important part. So the farther north you go, the more history you're going to find. All right. Obviously, if you're over in Siberia, you're going to find stuff that's far older than anything in North or South America. If you want to go back 20,000 years, right? You're only going to find that in Siberia, in Asia, in Europe, and of course in Africa, where everything began. That's how things work. And this goes back to the Pangea map I was talking about before. I'll leave links to this video. You definitely got to listen to this. But this guy here, the young kid, he's talking about how they were a badass. Why nobody likes the Crow. The main reason, and if you listen to the Lakota guy, they didn't like the Crow because they said that the Crow sold out to the white man. Okay. But this guy explained, he goes, that's not true. He said that they always learned that you got to get educated. They knew that they were sending custard to a bunch of Lakota and other Indians. They knew it was fully intentional. Okay. But they would get visions from the medicine men that would see that there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. In other words, it never stopped. The white man just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming. They knew that they were up against the losing war. Okay. And these guys were fierce warriors. Talk about no place for the meek. It doesn't amaze me that Devil's Canyon and all that would be no place for the meek in the poem. These guys were badass. I mean, not these two guys specifically, but they're Crows. Okay. They were fighters. They were warriors. I mean, they had, if you listen to what he says, they put themselves in a position where they were completely surrounded by enemy. Completely surrounded. So they had no choice but to fight. Any of the other reservations around here, any other Indians knew that if they went in Crowland, there was going to be a fight. And that's just what they did. They even fought with each other. Yeah. So they were pretty tough. Okay. but they were not stupid. They weren't necessarily, they didn't help. Custer was a fool. Custer died a fool. Okay. He was sent right into death. How these people, especially the Crow and the Lakota, and those are just two examples. You can go and listen to Francis Brown. It's another video I recorded here, PBS 1991, Historical Medicine Wheel discussion. I'll put a link to this video too. Listen to what Francis Brown says about the wheel. And this is from 1991. He tells you when it began, which is the same time Forrest Fenn. He describes everything I'm telling you about. He also listened to the Lakota man, okay, after you listen to Francis Brown. And incidentally, I keep singling out Francis Brown because he was the president of the Coalition to Save the Wheel and Sacred Sites of North America. Listen to this guy. I'll leave a link to this video too. I already did in my community section. This is the Lakota medicine man. This is his house. Okay, he is in South Dakota. Listen to what this guy says. You'll think that Forrest Fenn is standing behind him, and the street. I mean, if you listen to this guy and then listen to what Street says, it's almost as if they're talking. They're both the same person. Now, obviously, this video is only like a month old. So they didn't make any arrangements. The Street didn't see this and decided. They have common thought is just so interesting. But it's important that you listen to this guy. This guy said, I am not a Native American. In fact, he said Native American is an offensive language to use to them. I don't consider, he goes, and he's pointing at him out, he goes, you're a Native American because you were born in the United States, right? And then the young guy here says, yeah, the interviewer. He goes, you're right. My parents came here from Italy or whatever. So he goes, we didn't harm the Indians in any way. That's why I don't agree with the white man being singled out for pushing the Indians aside. It wasn't all white men. It was the Europeans that were here at that time. He said, and that doesn't include me. I wasn't here at that time. And this guy is actually saying, you're right. And we're not the natives. And we don't like being referred to that. He goes, I am of the Lakota nation. Okay, I am a Lakota. And then he said, what tribe he's in, right? They believe that each tribe is their own nation. Okay. And he was very adamant about that. I mean, and if you listen to Francis Brown, he says the same thing. He goes, Crow, Arapaho, Cheyenne. He goes, Shoshone. He goes, those are white man or the Europeans. Columbus gave us those names. We never referred to ourselves as that. Listen to these guys and listen to what Forrest Fenn told you. I'm telling you, this is not a coincidence. And these are the closest we're going to get to the people. We're never going to meet a Mayan that was around, 2,500 years ago. We're never going to meet that person. But there's Mayans today, but they're not the same people, obviously. But it would be nice to go down and talk to them if you want to. And that's exactly what Forrest did. That's exactly what Skippy was doing. You go back and you research their ancestry. You talk to people like that. These are the people that you listen to. And here's another video while I'm at it. Medicine Crow, the last war chief. I put this on my community also, and I'll leave a link to this for you. That's Joe Medicine Crow again there at a celebration on the reservation. This guy is amazing. I mean, a true badass. I mean, this guy went in and like stole 50 horses from the Germans and right into the enemy's camp and took their fucking horses. Then he goes and he throws his gun on the ground and beats the shit out of a German, hand-to-hand combat, right? Actually, I believe that's not totally true. Initially, the German had the upper hand, and then Joe finally beat his ass and took him as a prisoner, okay, and took his gun. That's why he became a war chief, what he did in World War II. This guy was amazing. Like I said, he's the first Native American to go to college and get a degree, let alone a degree. The guy got a PhD in anthropology. So again, you look at these people that I'm talking, these are tribal elders, right? Like Forrest Fenn said, he would listen to his father, right? He's listening to the older people. That's how Forrest Fenn got his wisdom. That's how Shiloh's getting his wisdom. He listened to his grandfather and he could study his grandfather. That would be how you become wise. You don't talk to some clown in a college. You're not going to learn anything because the clown teaching you isn't doing it for a living. The way you do it is get your freaking hands dirty. You go to Cozumel. You go and you research things. Go to Amazon or whatever if you're really interested. You hang around with George Friesen. You hang around with Ken Tankersley. You hang around with Joe Medicine Crow. You hang around with J. Ellis Ransom, right? You become who you are with. That's what you do. That's how you learn. And then you come up with your own interpretation. Okay. So Forrest Fenn, obviously, a lot of people, like I said, Sam Street, Candy, probably, I don't know how else. It's probably more. I do. That Forrest Fenn discovered something, and that's probably why the FBI was following him around and all of that. They wanted to know what he discovered. He didn't do it. Maybe the only way to discover that is by solving the poem. And I'm not now. This is where I'm deviating. I'm not talking about the $1 million treasure chest. I believe that's part of the deal, but I believe there's more to it. There's a bigger story, okay, and it doesn't come with a financial reward unless the discovery is exactly where he found the chest, of course. Like I said, there is no way anybody's can convince me that Forrest Fenn wrote this poem for fishing and he stuck it in a place that's not only illegal, but the poem makes zero sense there. There's just no way, no way it had anything to do with that. Come on, people. What did Forrest Fenn spend his life doing? It wasn't selling art. That's just gave him the money to help fund all of his research that he did with natives. That's what he was interested in. Collecting native stuff, collecting arrowheads, collecting Clovis points, doing these discoveries down in Cozumel with his brother, working with Creighton Fenn when they did things, and studying the Spanish, how they came and of course beat the crap out of the Mayans and wiped them out, raped, pillaged everybody, and worked their way right up through the United States, up into Colorado, I believe, is as far north as they went. Right, those are the people that went here and Cape Fear killed and beat the shit out of everybody and took advantage of everybody. It was the Spanish. It had nothing to do with the white European man. But anyway, there's no way that somebody convinced me that when you read The Thrill of the Chase, really read it and pay attention, that it doesn't have anything whatsoever to do with any of the stuff I'm talking to you about. Of course it does. I mean, just read the poem at a high level. Don't even try to forget about gold. The damn poem it's spiritual. It's telling you about life, right? So your solution has to somehow fit the poem. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense at all. I'm just amazed that I mean, I can't prove if I'm right. The street could be right, Candy could be right. I don't know, but I find it so interesting that we're all basically discussing the same damn thing. So somewhere in that discussion is where the true answer lies. So if you guys want to be a part of either discovering what the answer is, you should probably start listening to what Street and me and Trust the Living and Candy are saying. You're not going to get anywhere by listening to the 9 Mile Hole people, and that has nothing to do with fishing. So if you're watching a channel and here's somebody talking about throwing a fishing line out there or brown trout, just tune off. What you should do is get the book, get the poem, and read both over and over. Memorize the poem, read the book, read it slowly, go through it, and set this limit to yourself. I'm not going to look outside Thrill of the Chase, and I'm not going to look up. So I know I'm mentioning a lot of things here: Cozumel, the wheel, and San Lazaro, the name Forrest Fenn, his first arrowhead. Forget all of that stuff. Just read the poem and read the book. Don't even go to a map yet. Read the poem, study the poem, read the book. Keep doing that over and over and over. Okay, and look for hints, subtle hints. Don't look at places that he names. Forget that thought. Make sure that you fully, fully, fully understand what the poem is saying, because you've located what you believe are hints in the book. You go back to the poem. Now go to a map, because now you're ready to find the places on the map. And then above all, the other thing is make sure you're reading the poem properly. Like I say a million times, the poem stanza 2 has 2 imperatives. He's telling you to begin it and put in. He is not telling you to take it. Okay? He's telling you begin it. And then he's saying, wear warm water salt and take it to the canyon down, not far but too far to walk. He's describing an area. Okay. He's not even telling you to go where warm water salt. He's making a reference to it. He's describing it. So technically, the only thing he's telling you to do is put in below known brown. And like they say, Forrest, could you tell me known brown? Well, if I told you that, you'd walk right to it. Well, there you go. You're not ready to go out and look for anything until you put in. All right. And clearly, when you read the put in right beneath that, he's sending you up a stream. He's telling you right there will be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and water high. So by the time you get to that line, you better be heading towards heavy loads and water high. Because if you're not, it's wrong. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow when Street goes live, and hope you had a great Christmas. Peace.